It is not easy to see how the more extreme forms of nationalism can long survive when men have seen the earth in its true perspective, as a single, small globe against the stars.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all mankind. Your hosts here in London, Matthew Russell and Jamie Franklin.
Oh yeah, baby, Clarke.
Oh, it's just always good, isn't it, from him?
Oh, I love it. My favourite Arthur C. Clarke quote is, "I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God, but I'm very interested in her."
That is genius.
It's a happy 76th birthday to Rashid Aliyevich Sunyev.
Happy birthday. Who is this person?
He's a Soviet and Russian astrophysicist of Tatar descent.
Where's Tatar, Matt?
Do you know what? No idea.
Turkish.
So I think it's Tatar is actually an ethnic group.
Yeah, we've got Azerbaijan, China, Bulgaria and Czech.
Of Turkish origin.
There we go.
I think he's most famous, Sunyev, with his partner Zeldovich, developing the theory of the evolution of density fluctuations in the early universe.
Oh, it's some of my favourite reading.
Well, they predicted the pattern of acoustic fluctuations that have been clearly seen by WMAP and the CMB experiments in the microwave sky and in large-scale distributions of galaxies. No, really, really, really important stuff. And
wow.
Yeah, and he even looked at developing models of accretion disks of black holes and their X-ray signatures.
That is not just easy stuff, is it, Matt?
He's an absolute bang out. So happy 76th birthday to Rashid Ilyevich Sunyev.
Cake yourself.
I'm going to remember the legend that was George Ogden Abel on his birthday too. He died in 1983, but he was born on March the 1st, 1927. But what makes him so great is he was a popularizer of science and a skeptic. So he was one of the original members of SciCop, or the scientific investigation of claims of the paranormal that has become that's become the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry.
Oh, I want to be a member.
Well, let's join.
Let's do it.
So, Jamie, you got a bit of news for me?
Yeah, I'd like to touch on, you know that I love all things asteroid mining.
Yeah.
And this has just sort of stoked my fire a little bit. Hayabusa 2, one of my favourite probes ever from Japan, has touched down on the asteroid Ryugu.
Yeah?
Yeah, it started taking samples that will eventually return to Earth. Incredible stuff.
The Hayabusa 2 mission has been another international mission, another mission by a spacefaring nation that's just blown my mind.
I just love it. And I love this. And because we all know how much money's up there, Matt, just orbiting us. And this is going to go a long way to collect more data.
Bring it on. So, Jamie, why is the Milky Way so hungry?
Well, here's the thing, Matthew. As picked up by one of our favourite mags, The New Scientist, a team led by Dr. Diederik Kreutzen at the University of Heidelberg in Germany looked at a catalogue of 61 massive globular clusters in our galaxy. As you know, Matt, these being a dense group, just like my old schoolmates, of about 1 million stars that are found throughout galaxies. And they were able to look into the galaxy's past, which dates back to about 13.5 billion years, compared to 25 simulated versions of our galaxy. By measuring the age and metallicity of the clusters, specifically how many heavy elements they have, heavy metal, Matt, we can see where they came from. So our galaxy formed these metal-rich galaxies early on, which means it must have eaten larger galaxies in the first few billion years. What do you think about that, Matt?
It must have eaten larger galaxies.
Well, check this out. Not only did it eat stuff, it's still eating.
Oh, what?
Yeah, the presence of 35 less metal-rich globular clusters suggests it later ate another 3 galaxies, one of which is a dwarf galaxy that it's still chomping away at.
So it's merged with about 15 or so of these different types of galaxies as it's sort of chomping its way through the cosmos.
It's hungry, Matt.
There is a study that came out quite recently, Jamie, about globular clusters that says that they can't be any more than 9 billion years old. Now, apparently that makes the timings for this study about the fact that Milky Way is chomping through all these different globular clusters a little bit tricky. What's the scoop there?
Oh, well, yeah, that is true. However, speaking to IFL Science, our Dr. Krugerson quoted, "The globular clusters in the Milky Way are so nearby that their ages can be determined by looking at their stellar content on a star-by-star basis. The major effect advertised in their press release only affects the globular cluster populations of other galaxies and does not apply to the globular cluster system of the Milky Way."
Basically, working out how galaxies form is just really hard.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Just like science moves, we're getting there piece by piece. We're sort of moving slowly towards the truth.
Can you handle the truth?
I can handle the truth. I want to know if Bob Hodges can handle the truth. Now, I've got to talk about...
I think he can.
I'm going to talk about Gateway Foundation.
Here we go.
I want to mention a thing called Clarke's Law. We opened with Arthur C. Clarke. And, of course, he's the one of the inventors of the concept of geosynchronous orbit or Clarke orbit. And he was obviously a big advocate of these kind of spinning space stations. But he once wrote that new ideas, like the Gateway Foundation, have to pass through 3 stages. Stage 1, it can't be done. Stage 2, it probably can be done, but it's not worth doing. And stage 3, I knew it was a good idea all along. Now, I want to be careful that I don't end up in stage 3 too soon. And basically, with these rotating space stations that give us gravity and make everyone feel a lot better in space, I think we're stuck basically at stage 2. It probably can be done, but it's not worth doing. And
understood.
Just as a kind of, just before we sort of run into what Gateway Foundation is all about, this Gateway Foundation is really similar to a Taurus space station that NASA looked into with the National Space Society.
Yeah.
Back in 1975, and there's a great video about Taurus Space Station, and it even says during it says we'll be able to build these things before the year 2000. It's like, yeah, a lot of optimism back there. No, is what happened. It didn't. We're nowhere near that kind of timeline. So, what is the Gateway Foundation all about?
Tell me.
They posted a video quite recently, and I think one of the reasons why they've been slightly more emboldened recently is they've been doing a bit of maths about using SpaceX's next generation of heavy lift vehicles, the Falcon Super Heavy and the Starship, and they're saying, I think they're getting excited that if they have a kind of industrial space version of either of those 2 rockets, they'll be able to get very big things into space and start building this very large structure, which is basically very, very similar to von Braun's space station from Man Will Conquer Space Soon, from the Collier's 1950 magazine that came out.
That's right.
Of course, based on the original Konstantin Tsiolkovsky's concept.
Oh, okay.
This has been a long-held thing of a spinning space station that uses the centrifugal force that we learnt last week was fictitious.
My favourite force.
But uses the centrifugal force of a spinning object to recreate gravity. Like we said last week, you need a very, very, very big wheel to do it, where you don't have these Coriolis and other side effects that make the thing not work as you would expect.
Yes.
There's a chap called John Blinkow, who seems to be the Gateway Foundation CEO, and he's basically trying to point out that we need this, and goes into lots of details, reads out Scott Kelly's book about how horrible, the medical effects of low gravity are. And he's absolutely right. It'd be absolutely brilliant to have a gravity in space and to be able to make it. However, I'm going to go as far as saying I think this is a brilliant idea, and I don't think that the Gateway Foundation is a con or anything.
No.
And I genuinely think that they've kind of thought about it. But I genuinely think with Kickstarters and things like that, that there's a kind of it's like, really, you and I, Jamie, we could just go, right, we've got a space station design and we're going to raise money to do this space station. This company doesn't seem to be much further along than that. I mean, admittedly, they've got a couple of experts and more than we have, but really not much more. It would be like a few members of the British Interplanetary Society, for example, working on a similar project. It doesn't really have much more kudos than that. And one of the ways that they're thinking of raising money is via a lottery. But of course, lotteries have got quite a few legal aspects around them. It's not like running a tombola at your local fair because, well, that you need a license to run anything over a tombola, and to run a lottery, it's illegal unless unless it's the state doing it. In this country, you can't do a lottery unless it's the national lottery, and it's the same with America. And so the whole way that they're raising money seems a little bit dubious, and the whole idea of Kickstarter money going in, it's all fine. This is all a doable idea, but I just think that there's not enough expertise there. There's not enough elements to it to really take it that seriously yet. I'm not having a go at them because I think this is where you'd have to start, but I just don't think it's fleshed out enough to take seriously yet. But there's some really interesting ideas, having the Dream Chaser as the escape pods. Yeah. So every single pod has its own Dream Chaser that you can escape with. Which, when you look at it, you think, God, that's going to be very expensive. There's a lot of Dream Chaser, Dream Weaver on that particular.
I love that. Yeah. Well, I think that we should keep an eye on this and let's keep reviewing it.
And I wouldn't mind speaking to John Blinkow or another representative.
Let's get him on.
I think there's been quite a lot of these kind of studies anyway on space stations. The National Space Society have done a really good one. Yes. And of course, we have Rod Pyle as our guest this week from the National Space Society.
We do.
But they've done a really, really good one, and there's a lot of research on this, and it's a great idea, and I really want it to happen. I think a spinning space station where people can go and have gravity and not become ill.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
It would be a fantastic venture, but just the cost of it is absolutely astronomical for the time being. So, and there doesn't really seem to be a particularly great solution from the Gateway Foundation. I'm going with interesting, but not enough there at the moment to really go for it. We're stuck at stage 2.
We're stuck at stage 2. Well, let's just keep an eye on it. But I'll tell you what, it's interesting. Matt, it's that time again.
Space word of the week.
Standard sirens.
So we've all heard of standard candles. Well, at least a lot of our clever listeners will.
Big time.
One of the really horrific things that's happening in astronomy at the moment is this massive discrepancy between various ways of measuring the Hubble constant. Now, the Hubble constant is a measurement of the expansion rate of the universe.
Yes.
And it can essentially be measured in 2 different ways. You can measure it using standard candles, and you can also measure it using the microwave background radiation. They're currently giving an answer that's different by about 9%. Which basically means that someone's made a mistake, or there is something dramatically wrong with the way that we see the universe, and there's some new science that needs to be had, which is exciting and frustrating at the same time.
Equal measure.
So bear in mind, in the 1990s, when they were trying to get this Hubble constant nailed, this is when they were using distant supernova explosions to discover the expansion rate of the universe. This is where they discovered that it was accelerating under the influence of what we now call dark energy. And the people that discovered this obviously got the Nobel Prize. So this might be another Nobel Prize up for grabs if you can nail this. So anyway, back to standard sirens. So what are standard sirens? Well, we've all love our gravitational waves, right?
Who doesn't?
And this is one of the reasons why they've opened up such an amazing new window into astronomy. So, and we mentioned this on the show when it actually happened, was the one where we have multi-messenger astronomy. In other words,
That's the one.
LIGO and Virgo, when they pick up these gravitational waves, if it happens to be an event that other observatories can see, then it's multi-messenger. So the first of these events was a merger between two neutron stars. And not only did LIGO and Virgo see it, but so did Integral, Swift, Maxi, New Star, Chandra, Hubble, loads of optical telescopes, REM, ROS, Vista, ESO, very large telescopes, SOAR, ATCA, VLA, ASCAP, loads of IR and radio telescopes and different observatories, all at wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation, radio, infrared, optical, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray, the whole kit and caboodle.
Jeez.
So the message coming from this massive neutron star event can be seen in lots of different ways, meaning that these neutron star events, you can nail down exactly how bright they are because you've got all this information. So you can work out how much energy was actually in it, which means that you are able to use them to find out exactly how far away they are as well, which means, just like standard candles, the supernova explosions that are called standard candles, or the Cepheid variables that are standard candles, basically, because of the physics of these objects, you're able to know exactly how bright they are, so you can work out exactly how far away they are as well. So you're able to use standard candles to measure the distances, and you're able to do a thing that's really clever, called the cosmic distance ladder, where you build up distances step by step. So you measure the distance to nearby stars, then to distant clusters, and then to different bigger galaxies and stuff like that. And so you're able to build up this cosmic distance ladder using standard sirens, which is basically using these events that have gravitational waves associated with them. You're able to sort of see so much further out into the universe, and so you can skip many rungs of the cosmic distance ladder and start to nail down this Hubble constant, which will really, really help us to understand exactly what the hell's going on with the Hubble constant. Is there some new science out there, or is it just small errors in the measurements that have been used in the cosmic ladder so far? So it'll be really interesting. Of course, each rung of a ladder that you have, the more errors creep in. So at the moment, they're not sure whether it's errors, but it could reveal that there is some new physics to be had.
Well, I love all of that, and I especially love the word rung. And you said it twice.
I did use the word rung.
Matt, would you like an interview?
I'd love an interview.
Who have we got?
We've got Rod Pyle, and this is an interview I actually thoroughly enjoyed. There's something about Rod Pyle. The moment I started speaking to him, a lot of our guests are like this, aren't we? I just think that I think it's space. I think people who are fascinated by space are just generally good people,
generally decent peeps, I reckon.
So I really love this interview. He's a really great guy. He writes some brilliant books. He's part of the National Space Society.
Let's roll the tape.
Écoutez.
The Interplanetary Podcast, putting the ace back into space.
You've got lightning out there, Rod, is that right?
Yes, and in Southern California, I live in Los Angeles, it's an amazing thing just to look up and see water coming out of the sky. You see people walking out of their houses going, what's happening? What is this natural phenomenon I've never seen? So we're quite happy to have the rain. I could do it without the lightning and thunder, but yes.
Well, it's snowing outside my window, so we've got weather. So, Rod, for those of our listeners that are not aware of what you do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And I'm sure a lot of them will go, yes, I know.
I hope you're right. I am a very slightly, with emphasis on slightly, famous space author. And I came to that by way of growing up during the space race. So I was a preteen when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. And when other kids were off idolizing baseball and football players because basketball wasn't the whole thing that it is now in the U.S. at the time. I was at home with 2 or 3 TV sets assembled in the living room, which was a luxury then, with my own little mission control, watching the moon landings and the moonwalk. So it was an amazing time to grow up because these incredible missions of exploration were leaving sometimes as frequently as every 2 months. And from today's perspective, that just seems almost impossible, especially given the level of the technology and what we didn't know about outer space then. But it was an amazing time. So that really kindled that bug. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go into the hard sciences. I'm going to be an astronomer. So I enrolled at University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, got in the astronomy program, and about a year and a half later hit differential equations and calculus and realized, oh, I'm not going to be an astronomer. I know, I'll be a media guy and I'll talk about astronomy. So switch gears, and since then I've spent time in the documentary field, the History Channel. I spent time in visual effects with Star Trek and briefly with the Battlestar Galactica reboot. And then I got into writing, doing some journalism in space. And I thought, this and the History Channel stuff is great, but especially television in the U.S. market, they say, okay, talk about the history of Apollo in this episode. I only have 44 minutes. Yeah, that's right. So you can give, 7 minutes to each mission and don't include the ramp up or the ramp down. So that got really frustrating after a while because I felt like I was writing what would later become tweets. And so books were the way to escape that. So 2005, I wrote my first book. I'm up to, I think, 15 now. And I have 4 new ones coming out this year, which is a bit of a marathon that I hope I don't have to repeat soon. But there's just nothing like it because, as you know, if you're going to be interested in something and you want to engage with it, there's nothing like being able to kind of get down and roll around in it, I don't want to bring up any visual metaphors of pigs in mud, but you get the idea. Oh, this feels really good. And it's just the best way, other than being a professional podcaster and music person like yourself, it's the best way of making a living I can imagine. And I put living in quotes, but you get the idea. We'll talk about that later. So that's kind of where I've ended up. So I write a couple books a year on average, and then I also edit a magazine called Ad Astra. It's a print quarterly for a group called the National Space Society, and they're a space settlement pro-space activity group. And between those two things, I'm fully engaged, and it's just it's a real pleasure.
Wow, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about the society? Because this podcast is we're associated with the British Interplanetary Society. Is it a similar type of society to that?
Generally, yeah. It's actually the oldest and one of the largest in the United States. It was formed in the late 70s by Wernher von Braun himself.
Wow.
Of the Apollo program, as his attempt to kind of engage the public in this waning conversation post the Apollo missions. And in the 80s, it merged with the L5 Society, which was a group founded around the ideas of Jerry O'Neill, who was the guy who came up with one of the more thrilling designs for orbital colonies. So those two groups merged together. Tens of thousands of members, and they've been at it ever since. And their real thesis is we need to settle space. We need to get people off the planet. Not all of them, but we need to move humanity off of Earth and begin to reap the benefits of the solar system for our species, both on Earth and the people out there. And as I'm sure you know, there's so much raw material out there because, let's face it, everything we use on the Earth came from space. And there's a lot of it out there. So in terms of water ice that can be used for rocket fuel, breathable oxygen, drinkable water, in terms of metals that can be used to make rocket parts and habitats and everything else, in terms of rare earth metals, which can be obviously are used in lots of electronics, and China kind of has a lock on that market now. There's just so many resources out there. And that's not even talking about something like space solar power, where you can have power satellites in orbit that are beaming energy down to the planet and on the proper scale, really going a long way, if not completely, towards reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. And then you've got ideas of people like Jeff Bezos, who's famously said he wants to recreate Earth or allow Earth to return to its pristine state, be essentially held as a park, if you will, and move heavy industry and polluting industries off of the Earth and into space. So these are all long-term visions, but they're doable. The technology isn't inconceivable. It's largely a matter of scale and investment. And that's kind of what this new book I wrote, Space 2.0, is about, is really looking at, what's likely to be happening in the next 20 years? What can we accomplish if we put our minds to it? Why should we do it? And what is this? There's a sweet spot here between NASA, other national government space agencies, and the private sector. Where is that sweet spot so we can really see this start to happen in the near term and make a huge difference in the way we live?
Yeah, I want to get onto that question a little bit later with that exactly that mix of commercial and governmental space and where that's all heading. But one chapter that I'm reading at the moment from this book, and I really recommend it to our listeners because it's exactly what we talk about on the show. I'm up to chapter 3, and it's why space, and it's something that really does. It's brilliant because this is often a conversation I get embroiled in on Facebook with friends, and you see people saying, we spend too much money on things like space. And I do find it frustrating. So it's a really good chapter. So can you tell us a little, well, what I'd really like is, what are your kind of top 5 things that you engage people with when you're talking about why space, why we should take space seriously and why we should go out and do it?
It's a really important subject, and it's one that no less an organization that NASA has been struggling with since its origins, as you may recall, back in the Apollo era, when we were bending our energies significantly towards landing the first humans on the moon. This was a huge topic of discussion here, and it was embroiled with civil rights and everything else. But really, the conversation was, look, we've got poverty, we've got hunger, we've got disease, we have all these problems on Earth. Why are you spending all this money on space? Well, part of the answer to that is we're not spending all that much. At that time, we were spending 5% of the federal budget. Now we're spending in the U.S. a tenth of that. And at the same time, NASA's doing easily 10 times more missions and projects, way more than that, than they were at the time. At the time, back in the 60s, it was Gemini and Apollo on the human spaceflight side, and various robotic probes out to Venus and Mars, and that was about it. Now we've got probes outside the solar system, at the edge of the solar system, out past Pluto, orbiting Jupiter. We have plenty of Earth orbiting assets, a huge number of satellites and various kinds of research machines out there. We've got rovers on Mars, orbiters around Mars. The Parker probe just slung past the sun. Stuff headed out to Mercury, work going on asteroids. So it's a huge amount of work that's done with not very much money. Now, the budget is the NASA's budget is $19 billion roughly dollars a year, U.S. dollars, and that sounds like a lot. But when you look at something like, some of the military fighter programs we have here that go up into the foreign, edging up towards $500 billion range, 19 doesn't seem like so much. And when you survey the public, the American public, which they do every couple of years, I mean, a large percentage of people, you ask them, well, what's NASA's budget? Oh, it's about a quarter of the U.S. budget, right? No, it's a half of 1%. What are you smoking? Now, I don't know in the international sector how that plays out because I haven't studies.
There is an ESA study that just came out, almost exactly the same question. It's like, how much do you think you spend as a citizen on space? And for Europeans, we spend about $10 each, and everyone's guess was more like $150. So it was like an order of magnitude out.
So they're off by just a touch. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly the same.
So that addresses the expense side. And again, we're moving into this new era. I like to think of it as the second space age because I enjoyed the first one so much, where we're seeing more activity. But this time, there's a huge difference, which is their commercial return. So just stepping back in history a bit again, when you look at the returns, and I'm leaving the Soviet Union out of this because they had their own set of benefits in their space program. Some of the best camera lenses ever created, by the way, were done for Soviet spy satellites. But on the American side, we had the first flyable digital computer on Apollo. We had this room-sized computer reduced down to something the size of a briefcase. First use of integrated circuits in that role. Incredibly compact and robust software. And this is when computers were just waking up. They were new. And that's been what you can trace those roots very directly into the entire communication infrastructure we have now, especially famously cell phones and so forth. So there are those kind of benefits that relate directly to the consumer. Satellites alone, so much of the world economy depends on them for agriculture, banking, transportation. How do you track trains and trucks moving all over the country and ships moving across the world? You do it by satellite. Weather tracking, knowing what areas to avoid if you're at sea, knowing what the upcoming trends and weather are going to be, tracking climate change around the world. This is all done by satellites, and those were all first pioneered by the American and Russian space programs. So the list goes on and on. Medical is another huge one. And it's not just from the space race. These returns continue. There's work been done in the last 10 years up on the International Space Station, which is a consortium of us all, which is probably the wave of the future if we do it right, on wound healing, how to speed wound healing for difficult to cure wounds. That's just one small example. There's a ton of other things being done up there that can only be done that way in zero G. So it's a long conversation, and I kind of prattle on about it probably longer than I should have in that chapter of the book. But I really wanted to get that point across because here in the U.S., I do a lot of late night radio, and late night radio in the American market is people that can't sleep, right? They're awake all night. They're probably driving from Kentucky to Tennessee or something in a big rig. And so you get some of those very basic questions like, well, what's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you is already a huge percentage of what drives your modern lifestyle. And moving into the future for your children, the potential for clean energy, the potential for incredible returns. I was just reading a figure. Let me see if I can find it here. This was a Morgan Stanley study, one of our big financial firms, talking about the space industry being worth, and these guys, they're not wild-eyed optimists. They're chilly-eyed, steely-eyed missile men, in the financial sense anyway. $11 trillion by 2040. And that's up from where we are right now, which all space-based activity is worth about $350 billion. So that's already a big number. But when you start talking about trillions, you're talking about real cash. And a lot of this is going to happen in the private sector. And by the nature of the way these things evolve, at least as near as we can tell looking ahead, this is something that will not just be the 1%ers investing and benefiting, although that's kind of a part of what we're seeing now with Musk and Bezos and people like that. But shareholders, so mutual funds, there's going to be huge stakes in people's retirement accounts directly linked to space-based activities, and those returns will be massive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the argument I enjoyed most was I had the other day on a Facebook post where I pointed out someone was saying we should be spending money on averting global warming instead of space, and I was saying we probably wouldn't even know or be able to prove global warming without our space infrastructure. So the whole thing kind of is a little bit ridiculous, I think.
It is. And certainly tracking it and knowing the next moves come entirely from space-based access. Very little of that research is done on the ground directly. And I work at JPL on a contract basis. I go up every year or so to write books and materials for them. And I get to sit down with 30 or 40 of their young, brilliant, fast-charging principal investigators there, they're science people and engineers, and talk about their projects. And just some of these smaller projects being done in terms of climate change and weather just would blow your mind. I mean, we used to have to put up satellites the size of a compact car or larger to do this kind of tracking, and now something the size of a microwave can do it with ever smaller radar units, with ever smaller power supplies, smaller solar panels, which means they're cheaper to launch. You can put more of them up there. And the work that they're doing now and looking ahead is just incredibly inspiring. Every time I go up there, I kind of come home feeling a little lift in my feet, because I've had a chance to sit around with these really smart people that make me feel about as intelligent as my Labrador by the time I'm done, and hear their plans for the future. And they are unbelievably passionate, not just about space, but about change, about righting wrongs, about trying to set things back on a survivable course for everybody. It's a very pro-social group, and I know it's that way in other countries too. This is just what I'm exposed to here.
Is that what you mean in the title of your book about a resurgent NASA? Is that really what you're referring to? That kind of young spirit that's coming through in that sense?
I think so. You go to any of the major NASA field centers. So I spent time at JPL. I worked at Johnson Space Center for a while. I've been to Kennedy and a handful of others. And you talk to those guys. You say, what was your inspiration? Depending on their age, there's this bright line between Star Trek and Star Wars, right? And if you want to start a nice rapid fire discussion, you get those guys in the cafeteria and say something like, Star Wars is just silly space opera, and boy, just duck and watch the fireworks go. But they were all inspired, interestingly, by science fiction and, of course, the space race and the shuttle program. So the energy there is really inspiring, and they work so hard. And as you know, so many of them work on programs that never come to fruition. But that basic research and development they're doing usually leads to something else laterally, and then it either goes into a program that is funded or starts a new one. But their commitment and the level of excitement that's happening inside NASA, even with these constrained budgets and even with the course changing that we've seen here in the last 20 years, which has been substantial, they're just these untiring optimists. I don't think I could do it. I mean, when I was working at Johnson Space Center, it was right after the Constellation program got killed, which was going to be our return to the moon program that George Bush kickstarted in 2004. It had just gotten canceled. Every day when you drove in the main drive to the Johnson Space Center, you had to pass the building on your right that the entire lower floor had a painting of the Constellation rocket on the side horizontally. I had to look at it and think, gee, I hope we have enough money left to scrape that off, because that's not going to happen.
No.
So, they struggle past these challenges, but I think we are seeing a new NASA, and a huge part of that new NASA is their realization. I mean, internal studies, for instance, at NASA, these are ones they commissioned themselves, have shown that SpaceX is able to build some of their hardware components for anywhere from a half to a tenth of the cost that it would be for government to do it. So the messages come home loud and clear. You've got to start spreading out how you do things. You've got to let the commercial sector do what they do best, which launch is clearly one of those things. So even though we're still building the Space Launch System, as you know, we've got the Falcon Heavy, and then we've got the New Glenn coming up from Blue Origin, and the Vulcan coming up from ULA, United Launch Alliance. Those rockets are going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work, and I think that's really where the magic begins to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what has it been? Do you think that's been the key factors then for these commercial, for your Elon Musks and your Jeff Bezoses, etc., to actually plug in and fill the gaps for NASA and do it at this ridiculous orders of magnitude cheaper than NASA have done it? I mean, this has never been possible before, so why is it possible now?
Well, I think there's a magic of timing here. We're at a technological point where these things can be done, especially 3D additive manufacturing. 3D printing was a huge part of it. But really, it comes down to, as silly as it sounds, I feel like I'm looking sometimes at a 1950s science fiction movie where the crazy industrialist in Destination Moon says, I'm going to build a rocket in my back 40 and you guys will fly it. And then the military guys show up and say, no, this is our thing, and so forth. But it's a little bit like that. I mean, we had, in particular, these two arguably crazy billionaires who said, I've made a lot of money in tech. Business has been good to me. I've had this dream since I was a young boy of rockets and space flight, and I'm just going to do it. And as you probably know, when Elon Musk started all this in 2002, he went to NASA and he went to the military later and said, hey, I'm going to build rockets and I want you guys to be my customers. And the response was kind of like, that's nice, kid. Get out of the circuit and talk to us when you've made your toy rocket. And it was a long and difficult road, particularly for Musk. He didn't have the kind of assets to pull from that Bezos does. But they've both just persevered with this incredible passion. I mean, with Bezos to the point where he's cashiering $1 billion with a B of his stock in Amazon every year, which, when you're worth $154 billion, that's not going to put you out of business anytime soon. But it's a big commitment. He's really putting his money where his mouth is, saying, I'm serious about this, you guys. Same with Richard Branson. He's serious. He's put tons of his own money and others into Virgin Galactic. So I think that's what really is beginning to make the difference, seeing the investment of these guys. And then by extension, when you go back to traditional aerospace, these companies that worked on cost-plus contracts for decades with NASA and the defense establishment in the U.S., they have to change the way they do things. They have to up their game. And already at United Launch Alliance, one of the people I interviewed for the book was Torrey Bruno, who runs ULA. He said, look, we got the message loud and clear. We got to change how we do things. We've got to move our workforce. We've got to recruit more dynamic young people because there's an incredible new wave of brilliant young engineers coming up who grew up with computers, who grew up with software, who grew up knowing how to do these things. The guys my age have to learn by hook or by crook. And those people are starting to make the difference, and they're leaning out their operation, and they're looking into, at this point, designing reusable rockets as well. So these are just a handful of the many steps, and this doesn't even touch on the larger topic, which is an upcoming chapter when you get around to it, called infrastructure. And it's a boring word. I mean, you hear infrastructure and you think, you're talking about counting the number of toilet paper rolls in a pallet at the supermarket or something. Infrastructure in space is critical because that's when it becomes regularized. That's when it's normalized. That's when we have orbital fuel depots and outposts and manufacturing facilities and the ability to mine materials that we can use in space that's already there. So instead of spending thousands of dollars to launch a gallon of water, you just go up to the depot next to the asteroid or to the lunar poles and you grab it there. And now you're really out there in a meaningful way and things begin to ship. So I think that's where we're headed. But it started, I would say, arguably with these billionaires who, let's face it, they're building on the shoulders of the space race years here and the incredible work done by some of their competitors, actually. People like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and those companies, Aerojet Rocketdyne, have done, incredible work setting the foundations for this, and they're taking that and improving it and moving forward. So everybody wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's so where in this new age then? So where do the nations sit? As in, we had obviously the biggest part of the space race was this rivalry between Russia, the USSR and America.
Yeah.
And that's what really drove it, was competitiveness. But at the moment, obviously, with things like the Lunar Gateway, we have a collaboration more than competitiveness between Russia and America, and Europe as well. So where do you think that's going to go? Do you think we're going to have a mix of collaboration and competitiveness in nations, and a mix of collaboration and competitiveness with commercial space as well? What's the balance?
Yeah, that's that sweet spot I was talking about. And one of the people I interviewed, I'm trying to remember, I think it was one of the guys at Maiden Space, was talking about the idea of co-opetition, which is the word. Oh no, it was Chad Anderson at Space Angels, which is a space investment firm, because I've got a whole chapter on financing spaceflight and space development. And he said co-opetition is the key. And I thought, ooh, that's at first I had to call him and say, was this a typo? But it's competition. So, you're right. We can go a couple of ways. I mean, we see, there's a lot of grumbling in the U.S. because China just one-upped us. I mean, up till now, China has been following a very logical, steady progression of steps that look very much like the space race did in the U.S. and the USSR, of these incremental advances. But hey, they just did something we talked about on both sides of space base but didn't do, which is putting something on the far side of the moon. That's hard because you've got to have a satellite out there so that probe that lands on the far side can actually talk to Earth, because you're trying to talk through thousands of miles of rock, and it makes a lousy radio conductor, so you need a satellite off to the limbs so you can do it. That's tough. So that's a big achievement, and there's this gradual awakening of the sense that we're being not left behind, but we're being one-upped or perhaps outpaced. Now, I don't think that's happened yet. Most people who really look at it academically and objectively don't think that's happened yet. China's still emerging in this sense, but they have a different political system where they can make decisions a decade in advance and say that's it. They don't have all this democratic gooiness of changing administrations and congressional shifts and the shell games that sometimes go on here. So given that, that's a little bit like getting back to the moon race. You make a decision and there's a decade of development and you just power through it. So I expect great things out of China. I'm with Buzz Aldrin on this one. We talk often about this, and he is a huge advocate of international cooperation. We've seen it work pretty well at the space station. It arguably it might have been a little more efficient had it not been an international venture, but the international venture paid for a lot of that freight. So a big percentage of it was paid by foreign powers. And I think if we can begin to, so that was essentially an equal partnership. If we can begin to really leverage the strengths of each nation in their program, if people are willing to do that, and this is tough because you've got a lot of national pride in consideration here. China and India both are very much involved in that part of it right now, as we were back in the 60s and 70s. But if you could take what people do best, so for example, India orbited the Mars orbiting mission a few years back. It was their first attempt at Mars. It succeeded. That doesn't happen very often.
No.
There's only the fourth power to do that after U.S., Russia, Europe, and now India. And they did it for $36 million. That's really cheap.
Yeah, incredible.
I don't remember the costs on the Soviet side in the day because I don't think they ever published them. But in the United States these days, you want to mount a Mars mission, it's $300-400 million minimum. So I was talking to a gentleman there who's from JPL, who's high up in their engineering structure there, and I said, what's the future here? And he said, I think the future is we capitalize on these strengths. And as it turns out, NASA is working with India right now, or will be, on a mission. I think it's a Mars mission where India is going to do a lot of the design and engineering will happen in the U.S. at NASA, but also with India and their institutions because they've gotten very good at it. Then they're going to merge their efforts. It'll be fabricated and tested in India and then flown jointly because the cost of labor is lower and you've got this incredible, huge, highly trained labor force, which, by the way, I didn't know this, on the Mars orbiter mission, it was about 80% women because they're equally as well educated and incredibly capable, but they're, at least at this point, make a fair amount less than men do. So they were this ideal way to keep the cost down on this. So I think that's where you begin seeing the strength of this really emerge. And then let the government programs do what they do best, which is set big goals, do the push out into deeper space, do the research, build the infrastructure, sort of help lay the tracks for the trains, if you will, and then let private industry get things shuttled back and forth between Earth's surface and orbit and make things happen up there the way they can do best because they're incredibly efficient. So that's what I hope to see.
So once this infrastructure's been built and you've now got commercial space has to, in a way, actually realize space as a commercial venture without the support of the nation state saying, we need your help to do this particular project or this project. Once those projects are finished and it's commercial space going out to actually make money from space resources completely on their own. So people on the ground paying for stuff that's come from space or products and services from space directly with those commercial outfits. What do you think is going to come first, and how quickly do you think that's actually going to happen where we have a truly 100% commercial space?
You're putting me right in the crosshairs here. Yeah, I mean, one of the conversations that goes on in groups like the NSS and a certain sector of enthusiastic people is, when do we get to go? When do people actually go out there and begin to enjoy the benefits of being in space, whatever they are? And it's different for everybody. And there's different takes on that. Some people feel it's going to be only the very wealthy that go out and treat it a resort. Other people feel that it's going to be the miners and the engineers and people that are actually doing the hard. It would be like living on a North Sea oil rig, I think some of the earliest things, though, will be tourism. So hopefully this year, Virgin Galactic will start making their first tourist flights. Sometime this year or next, we hope Blue Origin will start making some of their tourist flights. So that's not a huge amount of revenue, but it's the beginning of a stream that will go on indefinitely because as that gets less expensive to do, more and more people will go. The question, of course, is will they go more than once because there's only so many extremely wealthy to go around. So the continued lowering of the cost of launch is critical. But I think the real step is going to be when we start being able to utilize assets that are already out there, as I was talking about, the metal in the water and the oxygen, lunar soil, and so forth, and begin to make the processes out there much more efficient and inexpensive. And then you could start doing research to discover the things you can do and manufacture and create in space that we don't even know about yet. So one of the bright spots in the commercial, on the manufacturing and assembly side in microgravity environments off Earth, is this, it's a fiber optic cable called Z-Blan, which is incredibly efficient. It works much better than the stuff we make on Earth. A single strand could go clear across the Atlantic Ocean with no repeaters, so it's espionage-proof and so forth. And it can only be made in zero gravity. Well, we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't gone up and tried. So the more of a foothold we can get up there and start getting brilliant minds up there, either in actually transporting people up there or through telepresence, to begin doing some of this this research work, then we'll find even more things that we can do. And I think that's where it really begins to wake up. And that's where the innovation will come.
So you think that those sort of things will start happening before, say, mining of asteroids or mining of moon resources or anything like that? Or do you see them as the same sort of thing?
I see them kind of running in parallel, although we had this kind of false start on the asteroid mining front. We had a couple of companies start up in the U.S., Deep Space Industries and Planetary Resources, got a lot of funding, started doing basic operations, trying to figure out how to at least identify and prospect the proper asteroids, and then all that prior to actually going and digging out the ore. And both of them have encountered significant challenges, and they're kind of adjusting course to try and accommodate. So I think that was a little premature. But I'd say, if I had to hazard a guess, if I was in Vegas at a table, I'd say 6 to 10 years when that begins to happen on a small scale. And then hopefully it'll ramp up very quickly, because the amount of valuable stuff out there, I mean, even just talking about something as basic as platinum, the amount of platinum in some asteroids is mind-boggling. And of course, you bring back too much of it, you'll depress the market, so you don't want to do that. But there are even people, there's one very wealthy gentleman I spoke to who said, yeah, well, just, here's an asteroid rich in platinum. He's a space investor. We'll just deorbit it. And I've already talked to people in Australia about landing in the outback. And I said, wait, what, really? They're okay with that? He said, yeah, absolutely. But, well, asteroids and meteors can become a significant weapon, so that's probably a more complex conversation. And that is also a part of the bigger conversation, which is where the regulation is, who's doing it, and how much it speeds up or slows things down. So a big part of this will be hinging on government regulation, and that's going to be different for every country. Then they have to come together and have a meeting of the minds. We need to rewrite the Outer Space Treaty to figure out how we can let people benefit from their investment in a patch on the moon or on an asteroid, and get around this difficulty of you can't claim territory in space, which is what the Outer Space Treaty says in essence. Besides not being able to weaponize it, you can't claim territories. So everybody's looking at the Antarctic Treaty again, saying, okay, how can we sort of modify this to work in space properly? But as one pundit here, Rick Tumlinson, said, look, I don't want to own the ocean that I'm fishing on. I just want to be able to keep the fish, which I think is a really good metaphor. So when you begin to iron those things out, things can begin to move more quickly, because now people feel it's safe to invest. So those are the keys. And I kind of dodged your question very skillfully, don't you think?
Well, I'll let you off then. But on that point, I think it's a really interesting point. Could you see somewhere like a Luxembourg or another nation that's getting its act together in terms of the legislation and the insurances and all those sort of things, actually stealing the march on this kind of new space commercialization, in terms of you just have a nation that just gets it right, sorts it out, and you suddenly have a world leader in that particular part of the jigsaw puzzle, as it were?
I wish I had heard the phrase stealing the march before I wrote this book, because I really liked that and I would have stolen it from you. I mean, look at Hong Kong and the financial markets in the 20th century. It was this huge, London as well, these huge centers of finance and commerce that were unrivaled. And yes, I think there will be countries that see those benefits early on. Luxembourg's one. The U.S., obviously, we have a kind of a unique structure here for tax and investment and wealth that allows us to do things that is harder for some other countries to do. This was something was related to me by the head of the German Space Agency, saying, "Look, we don't have that kind of structure here. It's going to be harder for us. We're trying to figure it out." So I guess part of it depends on how quickly the governments can kind of adjust their regulatory and tax and business structures to accommodate this. But yeah, I could see it happening in Luxembourg. I could certainly see it happening in China, because for a fairly directly governed system, they're pretty nimble when it comes to accommodating financial shifts, and I think they're very smart about it. And I hope it happens in the U.S. and Europe, because we all need it. We all need to benefit from this, and there's going to be a lot of money to be made. So let's spread it around a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you kind of see it in, say, let's have a kind of your best guess then. I'll put you back on the spot. I'll put you back in crosshairs. is where do you see it in 5 years? Where do you see it in 10 years? And where do you see it in 20 years, say?
So 5 years, I think we're just beginning to get the Lunar Gateway going, assuming that all goes as planned. SLS is flown. It's expensive. It's reserved for sort of special uses. And then an awful lot of the heavy lifting is done by the Falcon Heavy, the New Glenn out of Blue Origin, and hopefully Elon Musk's Starship is flying by then or soon thereafter. And this is really driving the cost of launch down to the point where that almost becomes an incidental compared to the other costs. So fabrication assembly is more than launch. And of course, fabrication assembly continues to come down. Miniaturization will play a huge role. We're already seeing CubeSats doing the work that full satellites used to have to do. So the orbital infrastructure around Earth will be ramping up big time. We'll have these constellations of broadband satellites providing internet access to everybody on the planet. Now you've got a whole bunch new brilliant minds being educated and coming into the conversation. So that begins to catch fire. On the human spaceflight side, I think we're in orbit around the moon, and we're just taking those first steps towards going back to the surface. There's money going into lander programs in the United States and elsewhere, both robotic and human. And we're seriously rounding that corner of, okay, where are we going to put people on the moon, and what are they going to do? This can't just be a scientific endeavor. It's got to have other value as well. Hopefully, commerce is involved. And so that would kind of be where I'd see it in 5 years. And of course, I'm an endless optimist. So
yeah, sounds pretty optimistic. I like it.
Well, it is. And, we watch SLS go through these trials and tribulations. It's taking a long time to get a Saturn V class rocket back in operation. But I think once it is, it'll go smoothly, because, the thing about NASA is, you go to a NASA assembly plant, and it's like this clean room where people are doing this incredibly intricate work on one big rocket. And then you go to SpaceX, and it looks like General Motors. There's second stages all the way over there into the darkness. There's first stages over there. There's engines all over the place. And it's not a clean room. It's a factory. And it's just enough to do it right and to do it economically. And it's really inspiring, because it really is a rocket factory. And that's something I'd certainly never seen before. So I think that's, an important step in learning how to do these things affordably and effectively and efficiently. So that's 5 years. 10 years was 10 years the next step?
Yeah. We're going up in exponential. Yeah.
10 years puts us as close to 2030. I think we're on the surface of the moon. And when I say we, I think the U.S. and the Europeans have worked out the lunar village idea. And it's probably still a little siloed, but there's a cooperative venture up there. Hopefully the Chinese are engaged, because we've got this multi-party system, so they can come into the conversation despite some of the difficulties we have with our legal structures here that prevent some of that. And hopefully we worked all that out, because they're a strong partner and they're a big player, and they're going to be there whether their base is on the other side of the moon or right next to yours. So, let's cooperate and not have to go 2,000 miles overland to get to the Chinese base to go visit with a formal delegation. Let's just have these things adjoined, and everybody's working together. So I think internationalization of it is going to be the big story there, along with commerce. And that's just the moon. Orbit, I think we're starting to see, we've got the space station winding down. We've got various private orbital facilities that come behind that for both recreation uses, hotels, and so forth, and also for manufacturing and science. Hopefully they're sharing the same real estate, because why not? That's much more efficient. And by that time, I'd like to think that not just orbital assembly, but orbital manufacturing and space manufacturing will be going on with space-based resources, because, lifting everything we need off Earth is what we have to do now, but it's not the key. The key is using the things out there, as I keep saying, because we don't have to take them up there. So let's not carry water up. Let's not carry oxygen up. Let's not carry up all these metal components. We can just go up there and we can print rocket nozzles. We can print booster stages. We can print pizzas. We can print sandwiches up there, because we've got all the stuff to do it. It might be a little bit of a stretch. I don't want space baloney, but you get the idea. And that's starting to make the difference there. Then going out 20, 25 years, I've left one thing out. I'm sorry. Another thing is going to be getting back and forth between the Earth and the Moon. Initially, that'll be done with purpose-built rockets launched for that individual mission, to get us from Earth orbit to the Moon. But as you know, companies like ULA are working on the ACES stage, which is this upper stage that can go up into orbit. It does its work. It's parked there. It either still has fuel in it or gets refueled, and it can sit for up to a year with cryogenic fuels in it, mind you, just in idle mode, waiting to be reused. So you use a less expensive, smaller rocket to get something off the surface of the Earth. It joins up with the ACES stage, that's ACES, and that stage then does the tugboat duty between Earth and the Moon. And then when you get to the Moon, you've got fuel there, so you can refuel there and come back to Earth orbit and be in standby mode for your next flight. Now you've got this taxi service going, which is a much more efficient way of doing things. Hopefully within 20, 25 years, we figure out things like mass drivers and so forth that can be even more effective, because it's just a set of rails on the surface of a body like the Moon, and you aim it at Earth and you charge it with a bunch of electricity and it goes zap, and the magnets send this mass back towards Earth. You got to be very careful to aim it in the right direction. You don't want to surprise anybody with it showing up on the surface. You want it to stay in orbit. And then you're beginning to move, not just mine and manufacture things up there, but move them around very efficiently and inexpensive. And now things are really opening up. If there's anywhere you can go anywhere you want. I will step back just for a moment, if I may. Mm-hmm. I wrote a book a couple years ago, Amazing Stories of the Space Age. And one of my favorite chapters that I got to really sort of play with was about the old Orion project, the nuclear pulse drive spacecraft that Freeman Dyson and others were working on in the 50s and 60s. And those things were going to be built like battleships. And unfortunately, they had to use nuclear bombs to take off from the Earth's surface, which isn't ideal for reasons we all understand. But if you could start getting not that particular kind of propulsion system, although people are still studying nuclear pulse drives, but really effective, high energy, advanced propulsion systems like that going, now we're not just talking about the Earth and the Moon, we're talking about Mars and beyond and the asteroid belt and so forth. So that's another big component, is figuring out advanced propulsion and how to keep, humans are fragile. We're not really good at being in space. We have to have a lot of protection and a lot of infrastructure to keep us going. We got to figure out, and this is across that whole span of time we're talking about, we got to figure out how to protect people and optimize our existence up there so that you can live there, you can have children, you can raise children, and not come back to Earth and have all your bones shattered the second you get out of your spacecraft, because that would be a very bad day.
Yeah, I mean that kind of opens up a whole new paradigm, doesn't it? The how do you change humans almost so that we can? It's either building something around us that makes that work, or actually changing what humans themselves. I mean, there's quite a few technologies that I think are really interesting, like CRISPR and stuff like that I think may actually have really profound space implications, because you're able to protect people maybe from radiation. Just have some people seem more immune to radiation than others. So maybe we'll see some genetic changes. I don't know, but that opens up
you're a brave man skating out on the thin ice in the center of the pond, my friend. It's interesting. You get into discussions that touch on transhumanism. I was talking to a group at a conference not too long ago, and this was particularly about like really just kind of wild-eyed futurism, which is of course the most fun you can have. And so they said, ultimately, if you're talking about the edge of the solar system or other star systems, how do we do that? I said, well, there's the idea of generation ships where people live and die for hundreds of years heading to another star system. There's the idea of suspended animation, cryogenically probably, before we go out there slumbering all the way and wake up on the other side, hopefully. There's the idea of just carrying genetic material and sort of rebooting humans 2.0 on the other side when you get to your target. Or there's the idea, like you say, of changing what human beings are. So what does it really mean to be a human being when we're talking about being in these hostile environments? Can we take human consciousness? My favorite idea is this. We take human consciousness, and because electronics are shrinking so quickly, we get down to the form of microorganic computing. And so basically you put human consciousness in a robot the size and configuration of a cockroach. I mean, you've got all these extra legs and hands to use. That's very handy. You can withstand gamma rays, any deep space radiation, temperature extremes, vacuum, all that stuff. It's just another day at work. It's no big deal. It may be a little harder to hook up in terms of dating and mating when you're trying to get used to the other person being a cockroach. But by then, the mechanical cockroaches will be able to project an image of something that's very appealing and sensual to us, and we'll just have a changed perspective. So although that's a little further, I think, than you were talking about, but you're right. I mean, I was interviewing a flight surgeon for the book at Johnson Space Center, really nice guy, and Bill Tarver, and he said, a lot of what we're going to be doing to try and mediate the effects of space travel long term, yes, we want to have partial gravity environments with rotating structures and so forth, but there's a lot of work being done just in pharmaceuticals, for instance, in bone density and radiation protection that show a lot of promise. So I think a lot of things will converge at that point to allow us to stay out there longer before we have to become cockroaches.
Yeah, I mean, how far away do you think a scenario like, I'm assuming you've seen it because it sounds like it'd be the kind of thing that you'd have watched, The Expanse or something like that. How far away are we from that? I mean, that just seems always, for me, even though I love being an optimist, but it just always seems just like nuclear fusion. It never comes.
Right. Well, and we have the penalty of knowledge of history, right? So if you were alive during the Apollo era, we were going to be on Mars in 10 years. No sweat. We've done it at the moon. We've got the hardware. We make it a little bigger, more powerful. It's going to take multiple launches. It's not a problem. Well, here we are 50 years later, and we're still waiting. And, it's not going to be too long before we're as far from the first moon landing as it was from the first flights of airplanes in Europe and America back around the turn of the century, the 19th to 20th century. And that's kind of shameful in a way, given how much we did in that short period of the space race to look at how long it's taken to take these next steps. Yes, we picked the low-hanging fruit. Yes, what we're trying to do now is a lot more difficult, but let's get with it already. So, The Expanse, of course, The Expanse, if you're going to buy into The Expanse, it's this kind of nihilistic, if you're living as a miner out in the belt, it's miserable, and there's all kinds of corruption and vice, and people have really weird haircuts, and it's kind of miserable. And then the next thing you know, everybody's at war because, as I discovered when I was working on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the ratings always went up whenever you started shooting people. And so that's why we had so many battles with the Cardassians and the Dominion and so forth. I hope that doesn't have to follow. And I hope that something in that general area, what I love about The Expanse is, you don't just fly around like you're flying a fighter plane, which has been long the conceit of space opera on television and in books. You got to flip and burn to slow down before you get to the other side. And I thought, wow, these guys are really putting their muscle into it. Yeah, they still have push button gravity. That's probably going to happen for a really long time. But other than that, at least it doesn't look like the lounge of a cruise ship like Star Trek Next Generation did with all that mauve velour upholstery and everything,
Yeah.
So I'd like to think 15 to 20 years, but I would have said the same thing at the end of the space race. So you're not going to bind me into that box.
No. So
but I'm an optimist like you.
Yeah. So I better wrap this up. So I'm going to finish with a couple of fun questions. Have you got the one question that we ask a lot of people is, have you got when you're talking to people and you want to blow their mind about space, have you got a space fact, we like to call them, that's your favourite, that always, every time you say it, you think, oh, I better check it because it just sounds so ridiculous now I'm saying it again?
Yeah, and you prompted me with that, and I immediately put it out of my mind because I was thinking about other things I want to talk about. I think one of the space facts, and this isn't a positive fact, this is kind of a negative, is that it still costs something like $8,000 to launch a gallon of water, which, then when you think about if you're launching human beings, please make sure they evacuate themselves before they get on the spacecraft, because all that poo is really heavy and expensive to launch. You're really getting down to nickels and dimes here. So it's incredibly expensive. I guess in terms of mind blowers, anything Elon Musk is kind of talks about doing is kind of mind blowing. The problem is it doesn't always happen on his schedule. But the idea of being able to launch a significant payload, like something the size of a Falcon 9, for $3 to $5 million instead of the 60 they're charging now, and 60 is already a revolution. I mean, these guys actually publish their prices on the internet. How amazing is that? Nobody did that up until then. I think that's kind of a mind blower, is that level, that kind of exponential reduction in cost, and what that will allow us to do, especially in terms of human space flight. I think that's my favorite. There's probably better ones, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Well, I think, in terms of the spirit of your book, I think it's probably it is the very essence of it, isn't it? Really, it's kind of what's driving Space 2.0. But yeah, actually, I really like that fact. Do you know what? I've never even thought about. Yeah, just going for a wee before you fly saves quite a bit of fuel. I never even thought about that.
Yeah. And then once you get up, on the other hand, if you keep it until you get up there, it'll be recycled into drinking water. So, it kind of works on both ends, but I prefer the first scenario myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we'll give you a chance to add a space song to our space playlist. Do you have anything that is space related that always kind of gets your space juices flowing?
I grew up in a classical music household where rock and roll was frowned upon because my father was a classical musician, and it just wasn't something that was part of the background there. So I have kind of a dearth of knowledge of popular music, although I do love the song that they played by Dave Bowie when they launched the Falcon Heavy. I think it was Is There Life on Mars, right?
Yeah, well, I think it was, he's got so many, but I think it was Space Oddity, I think that one. Do you know what? I'm going to have to check, but it might be Life on Mars. Yeah.
They timed it perfectly. So when the fairing of the rocket separated to reveal the Tesla Roadster and the light hit it, and we saw this cherry red car with a guy sitting in it, mannequin though he may have been, it was at this crescendo in the music, and I practically started crying. I thought, this is so amazing. You can't buy this kind of PR. NASA in the old days would have stuck a load of water or a concrete block in the nose of the rocket for ballast and said, okay, that worked. Let's take the next step. But Musk says, hell, I'm going to launch my car because it's more interesting. So that was a piece that I suddenly decided was a new favorite. I think the Sweet Venus from Gustav Holst's The Planets is another. And I always wish that he had taken the planets out all the way to Pluto, but of course it wasn't part of the conversation then. But can you imagine if you gave somebody like Stravinsky or Gustav Mahler the task of writing something about space, what they would have come up with? So I guess my favorite piece is that fictional bit that didn't happen. Yeah, I'm still waiting for somebody to compose that piece.
Well, you know that there was a bunch of composers that did take the Holst theme a little bit further. So someone did do Pluto, and I believe there was a British composer called Turnage who did a couple of the minor planets, the Vesta and Ceres, I think.
Oh.
So
I didn't know.
So it's out there. I think I put a couple of those ones on the playlist.
Okay, well, let me give you something specific because I'm being too vague here. Jerry Goldsmith's theme for the first Star Trek movie.
Oh, yes.
Because Goldsmith, I was fortunate to meet him a couple of times because he was in LA. I'm in LA. I was kind of part of the music scene. He would come out and conduct concerts at the Hollywood Bowl. I got him to sign the jacket of my laser disc of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, probably one of the most unloved laser discs ever created. And
I love that movie. But
we're guys that in another parallel universe lived with our parents until we were 50. So, there's an excuse for that. But I said, Mr. Goldsmith, I just have to tell you, having been a fan of Star Trek since the beginning, having spent some time working around it because I just had to, I was just working in the effect shop, so we were playing with models and stuff. But I said, you completely reinvented that franchise for so many of us, and I just thank you endlessly. And he got all emotional and stuff, which was nice. But yeah, it was an incredible theme and something they really needed.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's going in. That's going in.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you very much for spending the time. That was a really, really fascinating chat. I felt as though I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to finish this book off. It's fantastic. I'm really lucky to get a forward copy. When does the book come out, and where can you get it? And can you get it on Audible? And can you get it? What's the various formats?
It's coming out on February 28th, I think. And it'll be at all major booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online, physical stores, your local neighborhood bookshop. Support your local neighborhood bookshop. It'll also be on Audible, and it'll also be available in Mandarin Chinese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if it'll be on the same date, but it's coming out in that market and hopefully others. So, yeah, Ben Bella is the publisher. They're wonderful to work with, very aggressive in marketing and getting things placed, and they've done an incredible job. So I'm really, really happy and excited about this one.
Yeah, it's so well laid out. It's got the whole. It's just mapped out just perfectly. Really, that's what I really like about it. It's got that whole clarity of thought through the whole thing. It's brilliant.
You can thank Jim Lauder, my very capable editor, for part of that, because he ran me through the ringer more than once, and needed to, because the manuscript needed his input to be beaten into shape, and he did a great job. So, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Well, it's such a hard thing to do, isn't it? It's something that I struggle with massively, and I know all the students that I mark, they're not even close to having that be able to do it.
It is tough, and it's a moving target. I mean, I was literally calling the editor up till hours before, and unfortunately for them, after the due date for everything, saying, "Oh, Elon just renamed his spaceship again. It's not the BFR anymore." So trying to just keep up with all these changes and shifts in policy and investment was a major feat, but I think we did it, and thank God the changes slowed down a little bit right about the time we went to press, so it'll be right on time for a while. I'm happy about that too.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much for coming on, and
thanks.
I wish you all the luck with the book.
Great. Take care.
The Interplanetary Podcast is alive!
That was Rod Pyle, whose book Space 2.0, How Private Spaceflight, a Resurgent NASA, and international partners are creating a new space age, is out on the 14th of March.
Excellent stuff. Please check out his work. I believe you can find them on Amazon.
Well, of course you can. Yeah, he's all over it. Yeah, Rod Pyle, I'm currently reading Space 2.0, and it's a really, really great book. It's brilliant.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you very much. And of course, National Space Society, very similar to the British Interplanetary Society. Who's got the best figurehead? So you've got the Planetary Society with Carl Sagan.
Tick.
You've got the National Space Society that was started by Werner von Braun.
Half tick.
Oh, wow, okay. And then you've got the British Interplanetary Society that is most associated with Arthur C. Clarke.
Heavy tick.
Heavy tick.
There we go. Matt, would you like a space fact?
You know I can't finish a show without a space fact.
Right, here we go. You sitting down?
Yep.
The outermost part of our planet's atmosphere extends well beyond the lunar orbit, almost twice the distance to the moon. A recent discovery based on observations by ESA and NASA, Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, shows the gaseous layer that wraps around the Earth reaches up to 630,000 kilometres away, or 50 times the diameter of our planet. What do you think about that?
Well, so much for the thin blue line.
Not so thin.
It's not so thin, is it? That really does make you realise that sort of having an arbitrary line about where space begins and Earth finishes is really difficult, isn't it?
So a quote here from Igor Balukin of Russia's Space Research Institute, lead author of the paper presenting these results, says, The moon flies through Earth's atmosphere. We were not aware of it until we dusted off observations made over 2 decades ago by the Soho spacecraft.
Wow.
Think of that. The moon flies through Earth's atmosphere.
It's amazing, isn't it? Considering Soho was launched in 1995, that we're still getting all this fantastic information from it. I have to say, this is becoming my common theme now. All these brilliant probes and satellites and spacecraft are out there collecting tons and tons of data. And even when their missions are over, it's decades and decades of pouring through the data and you still find new stuff.
Matt, if I was a listener for the first time today and I enjoyed the show, what could I do?
You could go to interplanetary.org.uk.
Oh, yeah.
Have a little browse around there. You might find some nice back catalogue episodes. You might find a couple of beautiful pictures. You might find some interesting blog posts. You also might find a link to our Patreon page, where you may feel as though you want to become part of the journey where people join in and become Spodcats.
Oh, yes. So, Matt, it's been a wonderful show. I would personally, I don't know about you, but I just want to wish everyone a good weekend.
And me.
Take care of yourself, everybody.
All the Spodcats out there, we love you. We love you more than cats.
We do. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye-bye, Spodcats. See you soon. Bye.
See you.